Hi there, welcome to Conversations, where we seek to advance your leader and team excellence by discussing relevant topics that impact today's organizations. Welcome to the show. All right. Well, hey there, leader. In today's conversation, we have an Ask Anything episode where our experts are going to answer your questions. We've reached out to you on social media and gathered, we have 9 questions today, and we are going to try to get to each of those. Some of those are around coaching and assessments, how to help disorganized and unprepared leaders, how entrepreneurs can develop and grow their consulting business, questions around strengths and technology. And I am joined today by 2 of my favorite leaders who have journeyed with me for the last 6 years. Dr. Diane Wyatter of Wyatter Consultants. Dr. Wyatter is a leadership development coach and consultant. She is also a Gallup certified strengths coach and certified in MBTI. You can find her in season 1, episode 4, where she spoke about a strengths approach to creating and collaborating expectations. And for all you strengths enthusiasts, Dr. Wyatter leads with strategic, relator, responsibility, individualization, and maximizer. We also have Dr. Anthony Perdue, an executive and leadership coach, trainer, teacher, speaker, and consultant. He is the resident emotional intelligence expert for Bellum Leaders, but you can also find him at his website, dranthonyperdue.com, as well as in season 1, episode 6, Leading with Emotional Intelligence During a Crisis. Dr. Perdue leads with strategic individualization, relator, learner, and ideation. I'm your host, Dr. Kelly Whalen, a team strategist as well as leadership strategist with Bellum Leaders. My top 5 are responsibility, learner, connectedness, relator, as well as arranger. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here with me. Yeah, so we have collected some questions from our audience on social media, and so we're going to jump right into those and see what we can discuss and have a conversation around these questions. And we are coming, this is being recorded during International Coaching Week. And so I thought that we could start, and why is that so important? Because we all 3 of us are coaches, and it's important, some people may not think that it's worthy of being recognized, but there is such a difference between somebody who calls themselves a coach and somebody who is a professional coach, where that is their profession, and they have been trained and educated and gained wisdom around coaching. And so, I'd love for us just to, step into that question. There's misconceptions around coaching. And so maybe let's talk a little bit about, what coaching is, and maybe what are some misconceptions that you have maybe come upon on your journey of being a coach. Would anybody like to start that? I could even start, because I know that I had a misconception for coaching, and I wanted to be a coach.
Well, I'll start. So
right.
for me, I had a misconception as well, because I always thought coaching was like mentoring, where you showed someone the way and you were the clear front runner for what they wanted to do or become, right? So where you almost were a teacher. But what I found out was that coaching was not about giving someone the answer, but really about understanding how to ask powerful, open-ended questions to be able to create awareness so that individuals can help to transform. So really where the best knowledge of an individual self is within themselves. And so being a coach is actually pulling that out and helping them along the journey to some future vision or goal.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I think when I look back, I really learned about coaching and was trained as a coach in 96, 97. So that was when it was first really being brought into the common vernacular, if you will, when coaching as a profession was being launched. And so some of those misconceptions, I don't know that I had them because, if you will, I had that training pretty quickly as coaching came onto the marketplace. But I have, as a person, dealt so much as a teacher, as a coach, with what coaching is. And a lot of times, people are asking you, please tell me what to do. And that's not coaching. Just as Anthony was saying, that transformation doesn't happen when we tell people what to do as much as it happens when we draw out from them. And that happens through those questions. So one misconception is that it's a telling profession. It is a helps profession, definitely. But another misconception I think that goes along with that is that coaching and consulting are the same thing. And I often tell people, as soon as you start telling people, then you're not coaching anymore. People pay me as a consultant for my advice, but as a coach, they don't know it per se, although we try to work and educate them. They're paying me to help them be better through themselves and through who they are, as you said, through those questions and through perspective and feedback, through that trustworthiness. We talked a little bit as we closed our conversation yesterday about trustworthiness, and that's a valuable skill, component, attribute, characteristic of a coach. So, yeah.
Yeah. All of that is great information for the listeners. And I know my own journey into coaching was that, yes, mentoring, but then I thought, well, maybe it's like counseling. And and it's not. It's definitely not, because we are not there to heal people. We are there to allow people to bring a goal into the conversation and then help them position themselves so they can attain that goal. And so it is not mentoring. It is not discipleship. It is not counseling. There's so many things that it is not. And when I learned what coaching was for me, I lead with high responsibility. So when I learned that as a coach, I don't need to be responsible for the decisions that my client makes, that was like a wonderful moment for me to say, I want to be a coach more than ever, because I do want to partner with somebody. I want to walk with them, but I don't necessarily want to feel that that pain, and I'm going to call it pain, if somebody does not do what I, in my mind, think that they should be doing. Because, as you said during this conversation, it is about the person. It is about, what their desires are. And although we may have in our head what we see as a roadmap for them, it is so encouraging when they have those aha moments and know, because the client knows themselves. They know what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. So if I, suggest some field work or some homework for them, they can either accept it or not. I mean, I know what could potentially work, but it's always in their court, what the client is willing to do to get to where they would like to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was actually trained. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was trained by Tony Stoltzfus, Joseph Umidi, two men who really, that message of the person is the best expert. They're the expert on their life. And my role is to come alongside of them, partner with them, assist them in living out that best life. And Kelly, you talked about goals and, that how our role is to help them accomplish those goals. And one of the most difficult parts of this is that, again, as you look as a consultant, people want my judgment, people want my opinion. That's what they're, paying for. But as a coach, I really have to suspend that judgment, that skill of suspending my judgment on somebody else and my opinions about how they can go about something in the best way. We could talk about this with strengths, but the best way for you or for you is not necessarily the best way for me. So that solution that I might conjure up isn't really what's going to be best for the client, helping them to design those goals or helping them to design those actions and the plans, even that accountability. That's part of the role of a coach, but I can't give them the plan. Whereas a consultant, I would give someone a plan or give them recommendations. I'm drawing out from the individual as a coach. That's what we do. And that piece, I think that suspending judgment, that's a hard trait. It's a hard skill. But when we remember that the client is their own expert in their life, then that puts a whole different attitude in my heart and spirit in really coaching.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. The one thing I will say, there's a term called positive psychology, and within the context of coaching. And I know Kelly, Dr. Whalen, you're very good at this, and that's really about encouraging. When someone has encouragement and has hope and optimism, then they can get to a 10 basically in life, from a 0 to a 10. So part of, I think, our job as coaches is to also be that encourager. So if you think about a coach saying, motivating a player, you can do it. I believe in you, and you're given that motivation and inspiration. I think that goes a long way in coaching as well.
Yeah, and at all levels of coaching, particularly when we are with C-suite leaders, executive leaders, and you don't go down in an organization to discuss some of these things. And even if we look at an internal coach, there's times when a leader does not want to divulge certain information to people in their charge, and so bringing in a coach to come and unpack some of those things that are meaningful to them as a way to, progress forward for the organization or on their personal self-awareness journey. That's powerful. So coaching is definitely powerful. We are giving our clients the power to make those decisions, that we are there to journey with them, to partner with them. But in the end, it is all, they are the hero of their story, and that's what we want. We don't want to be the hero. We want them to be the hero of their leadership story.
Well, one of the things I appreciate, Dr. Whalen, even in your book and a lot of times in conversations that you bring up, is giving yourself permission. And you talk about that in a lot of different contexts, but it's part of the role of a coach, but it's also part of the permissions that we give ourselves to leaders. And I think it's one of those places where a coach can really help giving that confidence to a leader by being a trustworthy partner and allowing them to have that place of bouncing back and feeding back. But I love that all the time. I love to see in those places, give yourself permission. What if you gave yourself permission to do this, and really spurring that? That's such a huge place of motivation, I think, for individuals in the process of coaching.
Yeah, and Dr. Perdue, you mentioned about positive psychology, and I know that Dr. Wider, you have this one-liner or so about how it's been birthed out of. Could you share with us, how you feel that coaching, what it was birthed out of?
Yeah, I think it was birthed out of, and you can see this in a lot of the literature, it was birthed out of positive psychology was one of the areas. And when you look back, you see, you even see Dr. Gary Collins, who is a prominent psychologist. He was really fast into the Christian coaching field, particularly to help in making those distinctions between psychology and coaching. So one area it was birthed was that positive psychology. And the other reason is that counselors became aware that they were no longer needed to counsel people, but they wanted to help people. And now that they were in that healed place, to help them in accomplishing the next thing. So that birthing, there's a lot of skills that are borrowed and shared, maybe not borrowed as much as shared with counseling, because that's one of the places it was birthed. And another place it was birthed is out of that organizational performance and behavior. So you have these organizations early on when you look back and you see even the Hersey Blanchard model of that situational leadership, and you see that quadrant where they're talking about coaching. Early on, coaching was high support, high directive, and it was needed for people who needed a lot of support, and it was a lot of telling. As it really birthed then and became more of what it is, that high directive came away from coaching in terms of the skill set and the competencies with the ICF. But what's still needed is a lot of times that high support. And this is where one of those places where coaching gets lost. So the birthing out of that positive psychology and that out of organizational performance. But what happens and what has happened is a lot of people, we didn't mention this in the misconceptions, but a huge misconception in coaching is that it's only for people who are failing and that it's a last resort, that if this coaching doesn't work, then that's it, you're out. It's the last thing, we've done this and this. And that, of all the things of coaching, is probably one of the biggest misconceptions. I'll just say this, and I was on a training call with Gallup earlier this year, and one of the presenters said, we have to really, and that's the coaching profession, us as coaches, have to change the language and really help the professionals see that coaching is not about just helping the core performers. It's about helping those C-suite executives who are doing excellent. It's about helping our colleagues. It's about helping everyone become themselves, but doing better at what they're already doing and helping them to accomplish their goals and reach their potential. So that misconception of coaching is about helping the struggling only, those who are failing. That is a huge misconception. So those two birthplaces, sorry, that was a longer explanation.
That's okay.
Than you might have asked for.
That's great. Yeah. I think it's important. It's important to understand what coaching is and isn't. I think it's important for coaches to be educating others on what coaching is and isn't, because somebody can raise their hand and say, I need a coach. And we need to, as coaches, we need to, understand and have those initial conversations around, is coaching really what somebody needs, or is it something else? Mm-hmm. And a professional coach will always guide that person to the right helps sector in order for them to get what it is that they need or what their goal is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I'd love to maybe pivot here to assessments, because as coaches we do give assessments, and that could be either in a consulting. We're all consultants as well as coaches, so it could be in the consulting, it could be on the coaching side. And again, some consultants, some coaches, they just throw assessments out. My thinking is assessments should be meaningful, and they should be aligning with the goal of the organization, the goal of the individual, and really what is the objective. And so when we think about assessments, I'd love to get maybe your view on and your experience on assessments.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the emotional intelligence assessment. I think it's one of the assessments that really targets, who you are. And we've talked about self-awareness and being able to uncover strengths, and really understanding your self-actualization, being able to understand your own emotions, being aware of emotions, negative emotions, what are your emotional triggers, how you show up for other people. Are you able to empathize with others, or how you're able to relate to others? Really the 360-degree view of how you do a job. And so the emotional intelligence assessment has been one that I've used and that we've used in several organizations that I think really gets at the heart of a leader. It's said that that emotional intelligence determines a leader's success more than IQ or your intelligence quotient. And so emotional intelligence is one of those assessments that I think is definitely helpful. And one of the things that it also adds especially during this time of stress and anxiety and potential fear, is really that well-being component. How well are you? So it measures optimism, being able to measure your ability to think about the future, your ability to deal with anxiety and deal with stress, your stress tolerance. So I think the combination of kind of the softer skills when it comes to our emotions as leaders, also with the ability to understand how we deal with some of those emotions and how we deal with stress, makes the emotional intelligence assessments pretty effective for leaders.
Yeah.
Dr. Perdue, do you pretty much use those assessments with all of your clients, and how do you move them into that?
I haven't used it with all of my clients. I recommend it just because the EQI 2.0, given administered by Multi Health Systems or MHS, is a validated tool. So it's very structured and will give a good indication of what are your strengths of emotional intelligence. So I try to encourage it when possible, but I also think it's important as coaches that we assess, the situation and if it is indeed what's needed, because I've also seen where the Carl Jung topology test, or which gives the four different personality ratings. I've used that as well as via character, which assesses your values or strengths of values, like creativity, like spirituality, like love, like gratitude, appreciation of beauty, and the like. So I think emotional intelligence is emotional intelligence is the tool that I use the most, but I really think it also depends on the situation within the organization or the individual that you're dealing with in order to decide which tool is most effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great question.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Dr. Wider? What's your thinking around assessments?
I have used, my thinking is that they're tremendously valuable, and I know from a lot of research that there's these schools of thought that you only use certain assessments, and I think what Dr. Perdue was saying is a lot of times there's the situations and what does our client need. As a Gallup strengths coach, and even prior to that, I'm pretty sure that I could say safely I use that assessment on about 98% of my clients, pretty much because that assessment is really looking at people's strengths, and it's such a huge part of the coaching process, which is discovery for people, and it's a validation for them as well. So over the years, a lot of times I'd give someone the assessment or ask them to take the assessment, and they would come back with just these huge ahas about understanding their self, which is one of the goals or the uses of all the assessments, is understanding self, and that piece of strength for the client. So with the strengths, the Gallup strengths, used to be the Strengths Finder, now Clifton Strengths, it really helped people see that where they were strong. And a lot of people who would take it would say, wow, this thing that others thought was wrong is a strength. And that is one of literally there's moments where as a coach, I could cry with a client because of that awareness and that discovery. So that value to the client of seeing themselves, seeing something that maybe they've wrestled with or struggled with or didn't know how to channel and how to use, that thing is a strength. Wow, what that does for somebody is invaluable in the process. And so using it, I oftentimes can't wait for my clients to take the strengths assessment because of what it opens up for them. And that's one of the reasons that I use it and have used it. So for a while, I do life focus weekends and retreats. And when I do those, I use the MBTI as well, because that's a different instrument, and it helps people see how they process information, helps them see their preferences in communication, helps them see their preferences in decision making. That's one of the strongest elements of the MBTI, and people don't even really know it because they don't understand the instrument. We all might know that we're introverts or extroverts, and that's about as far as it goes oftentimes with the common language with the MBTI. But when you look at how you make decisions, this is huge in marriage. When you look at how you make decisions and how your spouse makes decisions, or how you prefer to make decisions and your spouse does, wow. I mean, I literally have coached couples where, the husband is a J, which is judgment, and that person who's a J, they're quick to decision. They want the decision. They want it closed. They don't want it open. With a wife who is a P, and that person wants the possibilities. Well, we don't have to make the decision that quickly, do we? And it's not because that spouse or that other individual doesn't want the decision. It's because there's more things to still explore. There's other possibilities. So when you look at those assessments, when you look at assessment in general, understanding what the assessment function is or purpose is huge, and not just throwing it out there, but it also, again, helps us with our understanding and our awareness for ourselves and for our client. So two assessments that I really like to use, but I definitely, like I said, I'm pretty sure I've used the Clifton Strengths 100%, but I'll safely say 95% of the time. So how about you?
Yeah, well, I a story kind of conjured up in my mind, which I'll share in a moment as you were talking. But, some of the things that I think about as I'm, listening to the two of you is that, people should not be afraid of assessments, number one. As well as you can take more than one assessment during your time with a professional, and it's wonderful for me as a coach. I may deliver the Clifton Strengths to a client, but if they were to come to me and say, well, I also took the emotional intelligence or the MBTI, then I can look at those and I can gain more understanding of the person as a whole. And so I think, first and foremost, don't be afraid of assessments. I think it's important to debrief with a professional, somebody who is certified in that instrument. I know that, like Dr. Purdue is my go-to person for emotional intelligence. Could I give the assessment and coach around it? Sure. But I would rather have my client see somebody who's an expert, as well as you, Dr. Wyatter. So if I don't have that certification, I want to have, trustworthy people around me that I can, fully share with my clients, with my organizations. So I know that they are going to be set up for success based on what that person is looking at, whatever assessment that they took. And then as you were talking, Dr. Wider, I was thinking about, some of the, people. All right, I'm just going to say it. Back in 1990 something, I landed in an interview for a recruiting company, and I was given some type of assessment. Now, back then, I didn't know to ask, what am I taking? I had no idea. I wasn't, of that mindset. And the woman came back to me, and the very first thing, and this stuck with me for a long time until I had a little more self-awareness about myself. And she said, well, you're very disorganized.
Wow.
Right off the bat. Now I look back and I'm like, that is not how you approach a client or somebody that you're hiring. And so, but now it's like I embrace my disorganization, because what my arranger brings is that my arranger brings that I have the ability to have, to be juggling lots of things at once and still be able to get things done. And to the person on the outside, that looks like you're disorganized. And so it was just an interesting way of looking back over my life with, so I was put in a box. I was put in a box of, you are disorganized. Yes, they still hired me. And yes, I did very well in the position where I was. But to come to me with that assessment and right off the bat give me something negative, I'm not used to that. I'm used to, as Dr. Purdue and Dr. Wider said, I'm used to positive psychology. I'm used to, let's be doing more of what we're good at. Let's not look so much at what we're not good at. Like with Clifton Strengths, people typically go, like we were talking the other day, they go to the bottom and say, oh my gosh, I need to be better at. And it's like, no, let's just flourish, where we're good, and allow others to stay in their lane and bring their talent to the talent table. And I'm going to bring my best. And if it's that what somebody looks at is disorganized, well, that's what they get. And you know what? They're going to be happy that they got that from me.
Yeah, and it reminds me how companies can they can use assessments in a good way or in a bad way. In your example, Dr. Whalen, I've actually done some recent assessments that I've actually created. And I've created those assessments based upon the organizational mission, the business objectives, the values, as well as the organizational leadership competencies. And so part of the value of assessments can also be to the bottom line of an organization. So imagine you have an organization where the leaders aren't living the values, or they're not living up to the leadership competency. So once you're able to assess it on both an individual level and a collective level, then you kind of know what you're dealing with, and you can measure the effectiveness of this group of leaders or this team based upon what your business objectives are. So there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Alfonso Mosley, who wrote a book around coaching ROI. If you remember him, I
sure do.
Yes, very, very, very deep. Dr. Mosley's very, very deep and very intelligent, very smart. He wrote a book about coaching ROI, and it talked about being able to take the organizational goals and coach to those goals. And one of the ways you find out what to coach to is through assessments. And so sometimes as leadership development consultants, we wear multiple hats. We may have to be a consultant to create an assessment based upon business goals and what we want to get towards business value. And other times we have to put on that coaching hat where we coach to those, to those competencies or areas of the assessment that may be strengths or weaknesses or opportunities or even threats, right? So I think assessments, to both of your points, can be used at an individual level, specifically with someone who's certified, to get to a depth of a specific area, whether it be competency strengths, whether it be emotional intelligence strengths, whether it be character strengths, or even personality. Or it can be at an organizational level where it's used to assess how your leaders and workforce are closer to the competencies, the values, and the overall mission and strategy and objectives that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's a great point, because as as doctors, we have been trained up in certain aspects of leadership organizations. And I was asked just the other day, what 360 do you use? And my response was, my 360s are customized. They're designed around the organization and the needs, just like you were saying. So sure, can I just pick a 360 and use that? Certainly I can. But if you want more depth and breadth for your organization, and how that leader is operating within their role, within those job descriptions, etc. There's so many things that can be embedded in a 360. It does not need to be, just an off the shelf, if you will, 360. And I think that's why people lean more towards, doctors who are who can bring this customization to organizations, because it does not need to be just, as I said, your off the shelf type of assessment. Yes.
Yeah, when you go back, I mean, I think this is important to really kind of highlight, Dr. Whalen, you mentioned just that place of feeling put in a box. And when professionals don't understand the use of the assessment, or when others even misuse it, we put others in a box, which in our head and maybe even for them can create really that stifling rather than that flourishing that happens. And you know, I'm very interested in Dr. Perdue's creating assessments. You know, as you look at the organization in the coaching field, which is a whole other point, I don't want to go off that tangent, but a whole other point in looking at assessments and looking at the value of coaching. So, but I'm interested more, Dr. Perdue, in what you're developing. Really, that's such a necessary component.
It is.
You know, and we're always, as coaches, I think, looking for those instruments that work and that are best suited for our clients and what they're trying to measure. So holistic and individual as well as organizational. Yeah.
That the assessment that I did create, I did the same thing you did, Dr. Whalen, which was I used it actually as an individual assessment, but then also as a 360, and where they were able to get leader feedback, peer feedback, as well as feedback from their directs. And what came of that was, and I talked about this in the other podcast, was objective self-awareness. So being able to compare your own assessment with the assessment of others and being able to see where the differences are. The science says that if, you know, the closer we are to what others perceive us as, the more self-aware we actually are. So that was pretty interesting to be able to use an assessment based upon business value to be also able to wrap that in a 360 to then be able to measure that objective self-awareness.
That's all the time we have for today's conversation. Tune in next time for more on the Roundtable series, where we're answering your questions with Dr. Diane Wyder and Dr. Anthony Perdue. Until next time, this is Dr. Kelly Whalen. Keep doing great things, because our world needs leaders like you.